Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. 2019 marks the 60th anniversary of the birth of Motown, the record company that started out in a tiny house in a black neighborhood of Detroit and fueled by the vision and tremendous drive of car factory worker Berry Gordy, became the largest black-owned business in the United States and one of the most influential producers of popular music in the world, mainly by combining the best features of black and white American popular music. Motown also changed the stereotypical portrayal of black actors and actresses in Hollywood by producing its own movies and provided a way for young black talent who had never been outside their Detroit neighborhoods to display their talent, earn a good living, and see the world. Author Peter Benjaminson has probably written more books about Motown and its artists than any other writer. And with the reissue of The Story of Motown, originally published in 1979, readers are able to follow the history of this now legendary company and how it changed America and the world. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you've written 4 books about Motown and its artists. How did a nice Jewish boy from California get so involved with Motown?
Well, my first newspaper job was in Detroit. I was lucky to get a job with the Detroit Free Press, which was riding high in 1970 when I got the job. It had done a great job of covering the Detroit riots of '67 and was trying to find out what was actually going on in the city, like all newspapers should, and like it should have done previously. But it was a great newspaper, and I was pleased to get the job.
And Motown was still in town at that time, right? It hadn't left yet?
Yes, Motown didn't leave for Los Angeles until '72, which was 2 years after I got there. And it was still producing quite a few hits up until '72. It didn't do as well in LA as it had done in Detroit for various reasons I go into in the book. So I was there, I had already settled, I lived in the city of Detroit, I knew people in the area, and I was very interested in how it had risen from nothing in a city that wasn't known for its musical or record companies, and then why it had left and what happened to it after it left. I was amazed to discover later, even after I left the Free Press, that no one had ever written a book about the Motown record company. So I saw my opportunity to write the first book ever written about that legendary company.
What was it like being in Detroit and living in the shadow of Motown, as it were?
Well, there were a lot of disappointed people around, people who had hoped to rise to fame as Motown recording artists, or at the very least as Motown employees of one sort or another, who were very disappointed after '72 that the company had left for Los Angeles. It was great for book writing because a lot of the people who had worked for Motown previously hadn't left. They wanted to stay in Detroit, and they knew a lot about the company. And I was there in the same city with them, so it was easy to find them and interview them and try to figure out what had gone on with the company, why it had gone up and why it had gone down.
I know how Motown music affected me when I was growing up in Birmingham, Alabama in the 60s. I mean, the music was magical. What kind of impact did it have on you?
Well, I thought the music was magical too. In '65, I was a student at Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, and I remember distinctly I was eating a hamburger in the Student Union restaurant, and suddenly I heard over the PA system, "Baby, baby, baby, where did our love go?" I'm not a singer, so excuse my rendition, but I thought, even I wasn't really practiced in musical analysis, I knew that was something new. I was startled by it. I actually dropped my hamburger. Luckily, I dropped it onto the plate rather than into my lap, so I was able to recover it. But I never really recovered my pleasant shock at the new kind of music Motown was producing. And I think that was the effect all over the country.
Yeah.
It was, there's a friend of mine who's a philosopher who says that America has one major issue, and that's race. And it has one major art form, and that's pop music. And those two are inextricably linked. They're the twin helices of our national DNA. Mm-hmm. I read that later, but that's the feeling that I had at that time. This was something very basic and very new in American life.
But we talk about, I mean, people talk about the Motown sound. I mean, I recognize when I hear it, but how would you describe it? What was different about it?
Well, for lack of a better word, it was a whiteification of black music. Previous black music, Billie Holiday, Bessie Smith, Big Mama Thornton, there were a lot of people. It was sad. It was, which makes sense considering the history of black people in America. A lot of it was bluesy, depressing. It was very well done, but it made you feel sad while you were listening to it. There was that kind of black music, and then there was religious black music, you know, gospel frenzy kind of things. That characterized black music in America. Gordy realized that he was black, of course, but he realized because he was an entrepreneur and very smart that that wouldn't sell and hadn't sold very well to white people. I mean, record stores were segregated, but you could, if you wanted to, I guess, go in and buy a record, a black record in a black record store. But that wasn't the real problem. The problem was that the music, black traditional American music, didn't appeal that much to white people. So he lightened it up in all senses of the word. Made it happier, added beats, you know, reduced the number of tambourines, reduced the gospel frenzy, but kept a lot of the good stuff, which was call and response, the heavy beat, and added a light tone. Basically, that was it.
So how did you go about researching your book? What was that process like?
Well, you know, I went out to, by the time I started, Motown had moved to California. So I went out there hoping to interview the then current employees and executives.
To California, you went out to California.
Yeah, right, and the guy who was running the company at the time, Michael Roshkind, who was later convicted of various crimes. He took bribes from record company, record producers, et cetera. I'll go into that later if you want. Anyway, he said he didn't want any publicity about Motown that he couldn't control. So therefore, unless I just wrote for him.
He wasn't cooperating.
Right. In fact, he offered me a job there, which I took as a bribe offer, and I refused it. So, but then he was so stupid that he didn't realize that because the company had been in business then for at least 20 years, there were plenty of former employees around, a lot of them in Detroit, some in LA, who certainly knew a lot about the company. Some of them loved it, some of them didn't. So I interviewed all those people, found them on my own, and wrote the book based on my interviews with them.
Any good anecdotes from when you were doing your research?
Well, I found a lot of people who had gone back to their normal, non-singing lives. I mean, I interviewed Brenda Holloway, who was a big star, fairly big star with Motown. She was, while she was unloading her groceries from her car, she had a normal job, a non-singing job, you know, and was living in just a normal place in LA. One woman from one of the Vandellas, she was working in a drugstore. A lot of the executives had gone on to be executives at other companies. So they were all mellow about it, but no one had ever contacted them. So they really wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
The newspapers, which were all the white-owned newspapers, the Free Press included, only covered them sporadically. Covered the company sporadically, even when it was at its top. They had a few articles, but there was nothing like the wall-to-wall coverage that I thought the company deserved.
In your book, Berry Gordy comes off as not only just totally driven, but as a musical genius and a visionary. Was he a genius, in your view?
Well, genius is as genius does, I guess. He was very successful. No one had ever united black and white musical sounds. And no one had ever launched and then ran for at least, 20 or 30 years, whatever it's been, a company that combined black and white music. Yes, he was a very successful businessman. He saw what the problem was, which is just what I told you, that black music of the time didn't appeal to most white people. He solved that problem. Then he solved the problem of how to avoid other big record companies from stealing all the money from the record production, and he solved the problem of how to find people who had good talent and discipline them and make them into good singers and basically good music factory workers. He solved he was from a business background, and he solved all those problems. I think he was very successful. Call him a genius if you want.
But obviously he had an ear for music. I mean, he knew what to do.
Yeah. Well, when he was a kid, his parents were business people in Detroit. They ran a grocery store, various little companies, plastering companies. They had in their house in the basement, there was a piano, and he used to go down, and the kids were encouraged to go down in the basement and play on the piano and dance and listen to records. No one else in the family was particularly interested in records, in music, but he played the piano. Obviously, he had inherited that talent from somewhere. He was never any good as a singer, but he was very good at seeing talent in other people, and that was his basic talent.
What drove him? Was it primarily the urge to earn money?
I think so, yes. The urge to be a success in business, which is almost inextricable from the idea of making a lot of money. In fact, the first song that he co-wrote was, and it was I think it was Motown's first hit, was called Money, That's What I Want. It's very difficult to get more direct than that. It was a great song.
Uh-huh.
He and Jeannie Bradford and 2 or 3 other people were working in a house, and they just started singing it, and they wrote it, and it worked.
Were the Supremes the Motown's most successful group?
Yes.
They were?
Yeah.
Ironically, they seemed to have the whitest sound. You know, it was like bubble gum. I mean, I never liked the Supremes that much. I mean, it was like bubble gum pop music. And Diana Ross had the thinnest, lightest, weakest voice of probably all the Motown singers. Why was Gordy so obsessed with the Supremes and with Diana Ross?
It's interesting, there are several questions embedded in that question. One of the reasons the Supremes did well is because Gordy was very patient with groups. With the usual rock company, music company of that time, you'd give them 2 or 3 tries at a song, and if the songs didn't score, you'd tell them to get out. They had their first 10 songs or so. I may have the number wrong, but there are a large number of songs that didn't make it. But Gordy kept going. He said, okay, we're going to try this again. We're going to try another song. We'll get new writers to do it. I think he realized that they had underlying talent that just had to be exploited in the proper way. Also, it fit in with his idea of combining white and black music. I mean, Florence Ballard had the strongest voice of the Supremes, but she had a traditional black voice.
Right.
And she was the lead on some of the early records, some of which I thought were very good. Buttered Popcorn, in spite of the frothy title, is a great song. And but he gradually realized that Diana's voice would appeal to more white people, and they were by far the biggest buyers of records.
And that was the reason Florence got bounced?
Was the reason that she was let out of the group, that she was moved out of the leadership of the group. Mm-hmm. She used to be the lead singer,
okay.
Diane and Mary in back of her. But he made Diane the lead singer, pushing Flo and Mary to the background. Why? And then Flo started objecting and felt bad about it. And there was a lot of, I wrote another book about this called The Lost Supreme, The Life of Dream Girl Florence Ballard. She was hurt that she was pushed into the background when she knew she had the better voice. There were a lot of conflicts between her and Diane. It's a great soap opera.
Yeah.
I suggest that my fans read The Lost Supreme.
Read that one as well. We're going to take a short break. Then we'll be back with Peter Benjamin, the author of The Story of Motown, after this message. Welcome back to One to One. I'm Sheryl McCarthy, and I'm talking with Peter Benjaminson, the author of The Story of Motown. What do you think was Berry Gordy's biggest achievement?
It was definitely combining black and white music. That was his first big achievement. His second one was figuring out how he could keep most of the money. In the record business, people try to steal your money when you're producing records. The producers try to steal it, or I should say take it from the singers. The writers try to take it from the producers and the singers. The distributors try to take it from the company that produces it. He was astute enough, very astute actually, to realize that he had to control all those factors, like John Rockefeller did with Standard Oil, that he had to control every part of the record producing business in order to make the big bucks.
And then he was able to keep the money, but he didn't necessarily give it to his artist, right?
No, that's true. It gets complicated because records aren't good for artists financially. They are
not.
Right, no. They make with any record company, they make very little money on the records. And Motown's royalties were low or lower than other people. That is, record royalties. Artists make most of their money from performance. They have a much higher percentage they take a much higher percentage of the money that they make on the road. And Gordy did send a lot of entertainers on the road where they made a lot of money. However, his model was the white record companies. They squeezed the artists for as much as they possibly could. 97% of the money from each record went to the company rather than the artist. And then they charged the expenses of recording to the artist's royalties. So out of that 3%, the artist had to pay for the unionized studio musicians who sat there earning $50 an hour.
Sort of like sharecropping in the music
business.
business.
Well, it's like writing in the book business too. the writer or the singer get the shaft most of the time in financial terms.
Right.
Sometimes they can make money, or singers can make money by performing. Diana Ross made a lot of money from performing, but when she left Motown, she lived in a nice house, which she still owed the mortgage on it. She wasn't especially wealthy. She really didn't have that much. That's the toll that the record business takes on its artists.
Right. You can have a lot of fame, but you don't necessarily have a lot of money.
That's right. On the other hand, Motown did do things for its artists. They paid a lot of their expenses on the road. They gave them advances so they could keep going on the road. I mean, when you have no money, it's kind of difficult being on the road. They paid them advances, which they took out of their royalties, but nevertheless, they actually paid it to them. And they had fairly middle-class lives as long as they were making hits.
Right.
It's just that they had nothing left at the end.
Right. I was very impressed by the Gordy family. They really worked as a team, right?
Yes, absolutely. They started out that way. They were very loyal to each other. A lot of especially the women members of the family, they were great business people. They all were good at convincing tour operators like Dick Clark to take the Supremes on before they made any hits. You know, they were great salesmen. They handled the money. They got the royalties from other record companies. One of Gordy's big innovations was the Jobet record publishing company. I mean, the real money in records is when your artist does a hit song, and then artists all over the world that are working for other record companies then sing it. They sing 100 versions of it.
Right.
Then you get cascades of money coming back. And
Is that because selling the sheet music or what?
It started selling the sheet music, but it became selling the rights to re-record it.
Okay.
So some of the big Motown hits were recorded by 100 other artists, and they all paid royalties to the company. They all realized this. All the Gordys who worked at the company realized this. They made Jobet the royalty. It's called a publishing company, but the royalty receiving company. They made it a very efficient company, and they produced songs that other recording companies all over the world would want to reproduce and thus pay royalties back to Jobet, Gordy, and Motown.
What did you learn that surprised you in the course of your research?
One of the things that surprised me was how poor a lot of these successful artists were and how poor they had been. It really shows how much people are willing to work for fame, because they knew at some level that they weren't getting the big bucks, but they were on buses all over the country, 30 days, 60 days on a bus. in the pre-integration days, that meant, since they were mostly black performers, that means they had to sleep on the bus too. They couldn't find hotel rooms. If they found a hotel, it was a stinking flop house. You know, it wasn't a great life. Mary Wells would sleep in the back of a car. She'd have a driver for 30 days, you know, one night in one town, then sleep, then the next night in the next town. Really, you have to be young, and it's a really horrible life.
Which artists were you most drawn to?
I think I was drawn to Flo because I actually interviewed her the year before her death. I taped the interview. It was at least 4 hours. I wrote a book about it. I thought she was just very sympathetic. She was a good mom, good wife, and a good singer, and she was outmaneuvered by Diana Ross, who was a much smarter maneuverer. If that's
Ruthless, some would say.
Ruthless, yeah. I sympathized with her. Also, Mary Wells. I wrote a book about her. Mary Wells, The Tumultuous Life of Motown's First Superstar. What really got me about Mary was that she was similar to Gordy. At age 16, with no experience, she went up to Gordy at a Detroit nightclub where he was busily trying to keep two acts together who were performing simultaneously, and insisted that she had a song that she'd written that he would want to make a hit. So he was finally got annoyed at her that she was goose-stepping right behind him all the time, and said, okay, sing it to me, sing it to me. You know, there was no accompaniment, it was nothing. They were in a hallway. She sang the song. It was Bye Bye Baby. It became a hit. She'd written it herself. He immediately hired her for the company. She went all the way to the top. I mean, she was extremely ambitious and extremely hardworking. Those abilities carry a long way.
Right. Now, Marvin Gaye seemed to be hugely magnetic. I don't know if you ran into him any time you were doing your research. Betty Levette, who I interviewed, who wrote a book and who I had on this show, was talking about, she said everyone wanted to get next to Marvin, men as well as women. They loved Marvin. There was something about him. A number of the Motown stars didn't fare so well in life. You mentioned Mary, Florence. Rick James had a tumultuous life. Is that just par for the course for a lot of once famous popular singers?
Well, Rick James actually did very well monetarily. He earned millions and millions of dollars, but that's because eventually even Motown had to start paying fair royalties to people, and James is very, very popular. I mean, Michael Jackson started out as a Motown.
Right.
Rick's problem was that he spent it all on drugs. Later on, after other companies started competing with Gordy and trying to take away his stars and paying them more, he had to start paying them more, and then everyone got wealthier and wealthier.
Right.
It doesn't mean you know what you're going to do with the money once you get it.
Right. So we got about a minute and a half left. So if you had to summarize Motown's lasting impact on the music business, on the country, on Detroit, what would you say?
I think Motown's big achievement, as I may have said before, was uniting black and white music and showing that it could be popular. It also showed that there were a lot of people, most of them black, whose talents weren't appreciated. A lot of the kids in Detroit who sang in the public schools, there were no talent scouts there except for Gordy. He realized that there was a lot of nascent talent there that could be exploited. And that's what he did. He exploited it. It was definitely to their benefit. And that was his big achievement, to show what the talent was and how it could be put to good use.
And you also mentioned this, and I'd never thought about it before, but you know, the 70-80% of the consumers of Motown music were white, right?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that high. I'd say it was at least 60%.
Okay.
Yeah. That's where the money was. That's what Gordy realized. You know, blacks bought black records, but they were poorer and there were fewer of them.
Right.
So you got to go for the big guys who have the big bucks, and that's exactly what he did.
Okay. Very interesting, you know, to read the Motown story again.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on the show.
Are there going to be a lot of celebrations of the 60th anniversary this year?
Oh, it's going to be a massive year. There's Broadway musical about the Temptations.
Right.
Just opened in the Imperial Theater. There's a TV series, which was originally named after my book, by the way, The Story of Motown. Once this book came out, I think they decided they didn't want to give me any more publicity, so they've changed the name to Hitsville.
Okay.
The Making of Motown. There's a cartoon series for kids in which each cartoon is based on a Motown song with a little like moral, story to go along with it. That's only 3. There are 4 or 5. Oh, the Grammys are going to have a special Motown presentation. It's going to be a year full of celebration.
Okay.
I'm amazed that Gordy's still here. He's 89 and he's leading the celebration. I mean, Diana Ross had a 75th birthday party at the Emmys the other night,
right,
with Gordy in attendance. I mean, they're not going to die ever.
Okay.
That's my final conclusion.
That's a good thing. We're out of time. I want to thank Peter Benjaminson for joining me today. The Story of Motown, a Barnacle book by Rare Bird Books, is available online and in bookstores. For One to One and the City University of New York, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.